Chapter 23, Fish-a-Thing. Madison let out a staccato cartoon rabbit giggle, which she reserved for rare occasions of profound glee. The face that peered down the tunnel at them was grey and fleshy. It had kind eyes much too large to be mistaken for human. It blinked at them as if it doubted what it was seeing. Below its eyes were two nose slits and a mouth, which had a tongue and lips, but no teeth. It had not yet shown it, but this creature, like its cephalopod ancestors, had only a beak behind its lips. Many cephalopods, like the octopus and cuttlefish, can mimic a wide variety of color patterns on their skin. This species was especially good at this clever form of camouflage. It could also mimic sounds better than any parrot. It had 5 limbs tipped with 5 fingers each. The creature was wearing a hooded parka lined with fur imitating that of a long-extinct mammal. "Can you understand us?" asked Ryan hopefully. "It's unlikely in the extreme," said Madison sarcastically. "Do you speak English?" Ryan pressed. "English," it said. "Yes," Ryan chuckled. "English. Can you help us?" "English," it repeated. "Oh dear," said Ryan, crestfallen. "Told ya," said Madison, still grinning and staring up at the strange creature. "But on the plus side, you've already taught him his first word. Only 10,000 more to go." "I guess it was too much to expect," said Ryan, disappointed. Madison called up at a louder volume. "The hole is too narrow." She held her palms flat, parallel, and an inch apart. "We need it." She slapped her hand on the inside of the hole. "Wider." She gestured with her palms again, indicating a widening gap. The creature seemed to be thinking it over. "English," he pointed to Madison and Ryan. 3 of his fingers came straight out from the palm like a human hand, but the other 2, one on each side, protruded at an angle more like thumbs. The hand contorted, changing from pointing down the hole into a fist with 1 digit extended upward. "Yes," shouted Ryan gleefully. "We," he pointed to Madison and then himself several times, "want to come up." He gestured through the hole. The creature nodded and disappeared. "I think he understands," said Ryan with cheery optimism. They straightened up, glad to take a rest from craning their necks to see through the hole. A crash echoed through the small space, followed by muttering. The creature reappeared a few minutes later. "English!" it shouted, and showed them an auger with the same diameter as the hole. He thrust it down onto the ice beside the existing hole and started drilling a second one. "This might take a while. I didn't see a motor on that thing," said Ryan, disappointed. "The original hole was only 12 inches in diameter. If the new one could be drilled perfectly parallel and avoid drifting into the first hole, they might be able to traverse it after a bit of refinement with a chisel or a torch." After half an hour of manually turning the auger and singing a song, the creature had drilled only halfway down and was doing no better than any human would have at keeping the 2 long holes parallel. The auger was drifting in a direction toward the original. The way it was going, they would meet at the bottom, forming a Y shape, requiring a 3rd and possibly a 4th hole. The temperature in the cutter had become very cold. Madison busied herself unpacking the extra batteries and heater. Ryan saw what she was doing and lent a hand. "Good idea. It's freezing in here," he said, but quickly added, "Oh, wait." He pulled out his cheat sheet of Madison-isms and consulted it. "It's bricks in here. That one doesn't make any sense. What do bricks have to do with cold?" "Brick," she corrected. "It's brick. It means it's so cold that walking outside your house is like getting hit in the face with a brick. Anyway, the heater's not for us. I'm going to stuff it up there. If we wait for him to drill enough straight holes, we'll freeze to death." She pressed the button, and the heater came to life. The sound of the heater's fan made the creature stop his work. He peered down the hole. "English?" "Yes, whatever your name is," said Ryan, a little frustrated. We're trying Plan B. He was attempting to climb the ladder while carrying a heater with an extension cord trailing back to the batteries. Once it was close enough, the ice began melting. It was a slow drip at first, but soon he was drenched. With all this water, playing with electricity doesn't seem safe, said Ryan with growing concern. When she didn't comment, he pressed, Maddie, is this safe? No, she said, and continued to unpack the pump and plastic buckets they would need to deal with all the water that was pouring in. After an hour, Ryan was shivering and looked exhausted. Madison turned off the heater and stowed the equipment. Ryan climbed down and did his best to discreetly remove his wet clothes. While he was distracted, trying to put on a fresh set of dry things as quickly as possible, Madison pulled the earring off the wall and put it on before Ryan saw her. She climbed the ladder to chip away at the hole with a hatchet. Large chunks of ice fell into the cutter. Ryan chased them down and tossed them in the buckets. Madison decided to test the width of the grotesquely shaped hole. She had been chopping hand and footholds into the slippery sides. As she got her shoulders past the narrowest part, she kept going, cutting new handholds as she went. Madison reached the top of the hole before Ryan realized what she was doing. Maddie, I was supposed to go first. He scrambled up the ladder and into the hole. Madison got her first good look at their host. The creature was 3 feet tall, with light grey skin. He had a fleshy, elongated head, which accounted for nearly half of his height. Below that sprouted 5 nearly identical limbs. The 2 descending from the rear of his body were a bit more muscular and supported his weight on feet that were wearing tiny red boots. Madison was certain there were no other limbs hidden by clothing because, except for the boots, he had removed all of it. The hot air from the electric heater had risen and filled the small ice shack. The walls, which were made of densely packed snow, now glistened with wetness. Madison cleared her throat, and he spun around. The large, kind eyes that had peered down the hole now looked up at her in surprise. "English!" he shouted with irritation. He hurried to get his clothes back on. As he did so, the color patterns on his skin became tiger stripes alternating orange and black in a hypnotic flashing. After a second of that, the stripes became leopard spots roaming across his skin, culminating in a single black circle ringed with white triangles, tipped with red, resembling a shark's open mouth. Once his clothes were on, his face returned to placid grey. "Maddie, little help?" Ryan called from the hole. He had become stuck. "In a minute," she called over her shoulder. "I'm introducing myself to an alien." She looked at the creature, patted her chest, and said, "Madison." She pointed to the hole and said, "Ryan." Then she pointed to their host. He must have understood immediately because he responded with a series of clicks and whistles. "Okay, we'll need to work on that. I'll be right back," she said, and returned to the hole to hand Ryan the hatchet. "His name is unpronounceable," she said. Ryan began chipping away the excess ice as quickly as he could. "Well, be careful," he whispered. "We don't know if he's dangerous. Any sign of Unpronounceable's family? Are there any others?" "Not yet. This is too small to be his home. I think it's an ice fishing hut. He's also odd." "What do you mean, odd?" Ryan grunted and shook his head to get a sliver of ice out of his eye. "I think we made it too hot in here for him, and he had to take his coat off. He was changing color like a chameleon, and he has 5 arms. Or they might be legs." She glanced back at their host. "Yeah, at least 2 of them are legs." She giggled. "He's wearing the cutest little red boots." "Well, can't wait to meet him," Ryan grunted. "I think he was embarrassed," she said. "Interesting." Ryan shifted a few inches higher. "Any sign of technology?" "Nope. The hand auger seems to be high-tech here." Ryan made one final push and emerged from the hole. The creature approached to greet him. "Unpronounceable, this is Ryan," said Madison formally. Ryan habitually thrust out his hand. Unpronounceable looked at the proffered hand curiously and reached for it, but instead of shaking it, he pulled Ryan toward the door, and Madison followed. As they emerged into the dazzling sunlight, they had to shield their eyes. Madison cast her gaze slowly skyward. There were no buildings within sight, but the blue sky was dotted with dozens of small things drifting in the wind. "What do you think they are?" whispered Ryan. "It's a parallel universe," Madison shrugged. "So I was really hoping for airships. In books and movies, they always have airships. It's like a law. Anyway, they seem way too small." "Do you think they're alive?" "Nah, they just seem to be moving with the wind," said Ryan. Unpronounceable tugged at Ryan and pointed to a place where the ice gave way to a rocky shore. The uneven ground at the edge of the ice was difficult for Madison and Ryan. Unpronounceable was having no trouble and only using 2 of his 5 limbs. Past the rocks, the going was much easier. They followed a winding path through snowdrifts topped with occasional long wisps of tall grass. As they crested the last berm, they caught their first glimpse of his house. It was a massive structure made entirely of thick, smooth glass. It resembled a translucent river stone with no straight lines, hard edges, or pointed corners. Although it was made of glass, it was so thick that the contents of the interior were still a mystery. All that came through was a jumble of distorted, bright colors. The path terminated at an arched entrance in the center of the structure. The glass door opened automatically as they approached. "Vadi the Kazi," whispered Madison. "This place is amazing." "Yeah," said Ryan emphatically. "We may have misjudged the level of technology here." "Is it ice or glass?" whispered Madison. She touched the translucent door as it receded. It was warm and smooth. "Glass," she said reverently. The interior of the home was chilly, but warmer than the freezing outside temperature. The first room they encountered was elliptical, over 20 feet in diameter, and dominated by a semicircular computer display at the far end. The display was made of the same rounded glass material and stretched from waist-high all the way to the ceiling. Text in strange characters scrolled upward. Unpronounceable sat on the odd-shaped bench in front of the computer, and the display changed. All of the text and other data disappeared, replaced by a 3x2 grid of faces very similar to Unpronounceable. "Looks like we're having a meeting," said Ryan curiously. All 6 pairs of eyes darted to Ryan as he spoke, and they made the same rapidly changing color patterns Madison witnessed in the ice-fishing shack. They all began speaking at once in the clicks and whistles of the alien language. Unpronounceable seemed to be keeping up with all of it. The 6 images soon divided until there were dozens of faces. "I think we just made front-page news, Maddie. Any ideas?" "They're deciding what to do with us," she said. "Yeah, I wonder which options are on the table." All at once, the faces on the display disappeared, and Unpronounceable turned to face Madison and Ryan. He gestured, and the floor extruded 2 new benches. They watched in awe as the benches rose from the floor like ghostly specters from a graveyard. "I guess we sit," suggested Ryan optimistically. "This is a good sign." A single image of Madison dominated the display. Their host pointed to it without breaking eye contact. "Madison," said Ryan, carefully enunciating each syllable. Unpronounceable made a swiping gesture with another appendage, and Ryan's image replaced Madison's. They spoke at the same time. Madison said, "Ryan," but Ryan said, "Me." "Let's not confuse things with pronouns," said Madison patiently. Ryan nodded and corrected himself. "Ryan." The image changed to a cartoonish animation of Madison walking. "Madison walk?" she said. This went on for an hour and a half. All the while, Ryan had been nervously sipping water from his camelback hose. "Do you think we know enough to steer the conversation to the topic of bathrooms?" he said, and looked around the room. Madison gestured to the water, then to Ryan's mouth, and finally his lap. Unpronounceable's eyes opened even wider, and he strobed through several colors, indicating mild alarm. He pointed to the front door. Ryan excused himself and went out into the front yard. He returned a few minutes later carrying a colorful object and a large amount of string. "What you got there, boss?" asked Madison. "I think it's a kite," said Ryan with uncertainty. In addition to the kite and the string, there was also a small parachute. It was attached to one end of the string, with the kite at the other end. When Unpronounceable turned away from his work and saw what Ryan was holding, he rushed over. He was cycling through colors even faster than he had before. He snatched the kite from Ryan and hurried outside. Madison and Ryan followed and observed while Unpronounceable launched the kite, let it gain altitude, opened the parachute, and carefully released it, whistling a short, mournful tune. Rather than falling back to the ground as expected, the entire thing drifted slowly into the sky. "That's impossible," whispered Ryan, clearly stunned. "No, it's not," said Madison confidently. "As long as you have a long enough string and the wind speed is slightly higher at the kite's altitude, it will pull against the parachute. The parachute pulls the string enough for the kite to stay up. It's not impossible. It's just a very tricky balance." When Unpronounceable was satisfied that it wouldn't fall out of the sky again, he turned and strode off. As he passed Ryan, he pointed to him, pointed to the kite receding in the distance, and made another quick gesture with one of his fingers. "I guess he didn't like you playing with his toys," said Madison with mild amusement. "Not toy," Unpronounceable said without turning around.